When my brother betrayed me, my wife's infidelity and the inheritance conflict, my younger brother Alex made my life a nightmare for years, and things took a dark turn when he got his wife pregnant. After our parents disowned him and left me their $3 million inheritance, Alex's attempts to reconcile and seek my help were a bitter reminder of the torment he had caused. Alex had always harboured a deep-seated resentment towards me, but if you think it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be wrong. Despite being the favoured child, Alex's hatred for me wasn't born from envy. Our mother always indulged Alex, treating him as the golden child of our family. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, and even expected me to help him with his schoolwork. I was expected to assist him simply because we were family, but I never received the same consideration. I accepted this as I was quite independent. Maybe partly my fault for always meeting his needs without expecting anything in return. Alex never helped me when I needed it. He only approached me when he wanted something, and our interactions were limited to those moments of inconvenience for me. While I was a quiet, introverted kid who enjoyed studying and keeping to myself, Alex was loud and rough, much like our dad. I also tended to be straightforward and honest, never sugarcoating things. My mother, with her tendency towards favoritism, might have developed a negative perception of me because of this straightforwardness. Alex, as the family's darling, had a comfortable position, and I accepted it without much complaint while we were growing up. Problems began when Alex started bullying and mocking me for being different from him. He would tease me about my height and glasses. These comments were often followed by physical acts of aggression, like Alex pushing me around or grabbing my belongings just to spite me. He would sneak into my room, read my diary, and then complain to my mum about what I had written. When I yelled at him and complained to our parents about him invading my privacy, they laughed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. His actions escalated from nearly breaking my glasses to putting nasty things in my food. On one occasion, he put small stones in my cereal, but luckily I found them before they could damage my teeth. When I told my mum, she dismissed it, saying, "This is how brothers bond." Whenever we fought, Alex would zero in on my insecurities to insult me. We attended the same school, so he knew I was being bullied by a few kids. Instead of supporting me, he sided with the bullies, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, and encouraging them to physically harm me. He even told me to kill myself during a trivial argument, which, despite my ability to brush off most insults, deeply hurt me, as I was struggling with my mental health at the time. Our situation worsened during high school. There was an incident where Alex attempted to set my hair on fire, and, unbelievably, our mother defended him, claiming he was merely playing. Thankfully, my dad eventually sided with me. He pointed out the gravity of the situation and even threatened to call the police on Alex. This moment was a real eye-opener for Alex, as he had never faced any consequences for his actions before. My dad made it clear that enough was enough, and that Alex needed to start respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support, because he always told Alex how similar they were, which was true. Dad admitted that he had waited for years, hoping Alex would mature, but he was slowly realizing that Alex was becoming a big bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly validating, and I almost broke down in tears. I confessed everything Alex had done to me over the years, including the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I had endured. The next day, he spoke to the principal to ensure the bullies were warned about severe consequences if they continued. Later that evening, Dad enrolled me in MMA classes at our local gym, telling me I needed to man up and stand up to bullies in my life. I admit that a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight might have seemed laughable, but I was very focused. I managed my time well to balance my studies and daily workouts, and the MMA classes completely transformed my physique and confidence. One day, Alex was up to his antics again. He stole my pocket money, which we received for helping with chores. I'd been saving it for a while, and Alex sneaked into my room to take it. I caught him just as he was about to cycle off with his friends. I demanded he return my money, but Alex mocked me, saying all I could do was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him in the face. He was stunned, fell backward, and I retrieved my money from his pocket before throwing him back down. Alex started crying loudly, which was quite comical, but my mother rushed out to help him and find out what happened. When she learned I had fought him, she was surprised and reprimanded me, saying I should be a better role model for Alex, who seemed to enjoy seeing me scolded. My mother complained to my dad about my behaviour, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad grimly asked both of us to explain ourselves. I told him how Alex had stolen the money I had worked hard for and saved, while Alex tried to justify it by saying he needed the money for a date and that, as his brother, I should help him. However, Dad told Alex he was lucky I only punched him for stealing because anyone else would have called the police. He continued to tell Alex that he had no right to take other people's things without their consent, and Alex didn't like that and threw a tantrum, likely hoping our mother would side with him, but Dad remained firm. When Alex realised he wasn't going to be punished for being hit, he screamed how much he hated me and ran back to his room, locking himself in. Following that incident, Alex began to distance himself from me. He had finally understood that he couldn't bully me anymore, and that even Dad had stopped supporting his antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were equals. Though he could no longer physically harm me, he resorted to verbal insults when our parents weren't around. His behaviour worsened with age, becoming angrier and more short-tempered each year. When I approached him with a question, he would ignore me and walk away, muttering insults like nerd or loser under his breath. If he needed to communicate something, he would relay it through our mother instead of speaking to me directly. When I questioned her about why Alex couldn't just talk to me, she would urge me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or genuine hatred. Dealing with his comments became unbearable, and I longed to move out and get away from him. I repeatedly asked my mother to mediate a sit-down conversation for us to resolve our issues, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her opinion on why Alex treated me this way, she would brush off the question. Eventually, I left for my dream university, having earned a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mum seemed proud. However, Alex remained aloof and distant, barely acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic home environment. The first few months at university were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started to build a life separate from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant fear of Alex's verbal attacks lifted, giving me a newfound sense of peace. During my second year, I met my wife Emily at a frat party through a friend, and we immediately clicked. Emily was the antithesis of my past relationships. Where others had failed to understand me, she seemed to grasp my essence intuitively. Her laughter was a balm for my scars, and her presence provided the comfort and solace I had longed for. Coming from a conservative background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. However, when we discovered she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry right after graduation. Our wedding was a small but joyful ceremony. Our parents were happy for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that moment, I believed Emily was the love of my life. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, one woman to come home to and share my life with. Despite other women showing interest over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely content in my marriage. Emily was my dream girl, and I never wanted to hurt her. However, I later uncovered 2 incidents of infidelity in our marriage. One was an intermittent affair with a married co-worker that spanned several years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might argue that infidelity is not uncommon, but to me, it was the ultimate betrayal. I couldn't fathom that Emily, whom I had cherished, could betray me like this. In an effort to understand her actions, I questioned her, and her explanations seemed more like justifications. She claimed that the affairs were attempts to escape our marital problems, but it was hard for me to reconcile that with the depth of her betrayal. I tried to focus on our son, but it was challenging. Despite Emily's attempts to make amends, I struggled with the knowledge that our relationship had been compromised. I needed to stay strong for our child and find a way to protect him from experiencing the same dysfunction I had known growing up. Just as I thought life was stabilizing, Alex reappeared. One day, he knocked on our door, looking like a mess. He explained he had lost his job and been evicted from his apartment for failing to pay rent. He was also in debt and had no place to go. Despite my feelings of resentment, I decided to help him. I figured assisting him in getting back on his feet was the right thing to do, especially since he seemed to be trying to turn over a new leaf. Our parents had disowned him, and his friends had abandoned him. He was in dire need of a place to stay, and despite everything, I chose to offer him support. Initially, Alex appeared grateful, and I was cautiously hopeful about the situation. However, his stay quickly turned into a source of tension. His old habits re-emerged, including the mocking tone and tendency to cause trouble. He often criticized me and Emily, making derogatory remarks about our choices and lifestyle. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Alex confronted me about the inheritance. He argued that since our parents had disowned him and left me the entire inheritance, he deserved a share. This demand was the breaking point for me. I had already offered him shelter and support, and now he was trying to exploit the situation further. Our argument escalated quickly. Alex's entitlement was infuriating, and I couldn't believe he was still trying to manipulate things to his advantage. I told him he had no claim to the inheritance, and that his behaviour had irreparably damaged our relationship. Despite his protests, I was firm in my stance. I'd worked hard for what I had, and his attempts to undermine that were unacceptable. Alex eventually left our home, defeated and angry. The fallout from his visit lingered for weeks. Emily and I struggled with the emotional toll it had taken on us. Despite our efforts to help Alex, his presence had caused more harm than good. His departure left us with a mixture of relief and disappointment. I had hoped for reconciliation and a chance to rebuild our relationship, but it seemed his old habits and resentments were too ingrained to change. In the end, the experience taught me valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and forgiveness. Despite the pain and struggles, I realized I needed to prioritize my well-being and the well-being of my family. Alex's actions and behavior had been a constant source of stress, and while I had tried to offer him support, it was clear that some issues couldn't be resolved simply by extending a helping hand. The road to healing was long and challenging, but Emily and I worked together to rebuild our lives and focus on what truly mattered, our family and our future. The journey was far from easy, but it taught me the importance of setting boundaries, standing up for oneself, and making choices that align with one's values and well-being.